little bit of snow and ice sticking around still for today. It's still cold. And what's going on today? It's kind of interesting reading this one. I believe it was a follow-up story of that one where somebody flew an FPV drone into a fire station, and afterwards they kind of lied about it to my knowledge just to try to get the drone back and to say, hey, it wasn't me that flew it, which eventually turned out it was. So what was his punishment? This one says, drone pilot sentenced for buzzing VA fire station. A drone pilot who pleaded guilty to flying his drone into a Salem fire station and dive bombing firefighters with a device was sentenced to 2 years probation. James Week flew his unregistered drone into the station, harassing firefighters for close to 10 minutes in July 2019. The drone pilot apparently lost contact with the drone after a firefighter closed the bay doors and the aircraft struck a pole, bounced off an ambulance, and crashed into the floor. Really dumb to do that. At the same time, I still remember some of the articles saying how they apparently tried to hose it down and so forth. I was like, is it really that hard to take down an FPV drone? It says, later that same day, Weeks went to the Salem Police Department to regain his drone, telling them a friend was flying it. Police informed him it was seized as part of an investigation, and he told the police he was the pilot operating the unregistered drone. Saying, quote, "It was an absolutely stupid mistake," Weeks said during a sentencing hearing in Roanoke Federal Court. "I totally regret the decision I made." In addition to the probation, Weeks had to give up ownership of the drone as part of his plea agreement. So do you think, I guess, overall, it makes sense in terms of the punishment he got and stuff like that? Either way, regulations or not, it's pretty dumb to do that, going right into a fire station and all that. No excuse in my opinion. Basically, you should treat these as an incident, not create over-the-top regulations that affect everyone for flying even like, say, a toy and so forth. Which makes me think, because actually this Russia versus Ukraine story kind of relates to that thought in many ways. But first here, apparently, as everyone knows, Ukraine's being invaded, and apparently they're calling on, I guess, citizens to take action. They're arming them and so forth. This one here first says, ordinary Ukrainian citizens are taking up arms to fend off Russian forces as they close in on Kyiv. It says here, Ukraine's government is distributing firearms to anyone who wants to fight and teaching people how to make Molotov cocktails. Kyiv came under heavy attack early Friday morning local time as Russian forces entered the city. But ultimately, I guess they need it because it seems like the rest of the world are basically going after Russia based on things like sanctions as opposed to sending in troops. And it says, as Russian forces started making their way toward Kyiv, the Ukrainian government called on all citizens and patriots to take up arms in defense of the country, saying that only an ID was required and adding, "We give weapons to all patriots. We will give weapons to anyone who wants to defend the country," Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in a tweet. "Be ready to support Ukraine in the squares of our cities." And they were. And it says here they distributed like what, about 18,000 rifles? It makes me wonder too, is it actually easy to learn how to shoot stuff like that? And that gives you kind of a perspective too, because I know in other places around the world they will say, oh, it's horrible, even if people are, I guess, using stuff like that like as a hobby, like a shooting range for example. But at times like this, I guess you'd have to look back and say, okay, was it a good idea to get rid of all this where you could use that skill now in this situation, I guess you could say. Which makes you kind of think too, because apparently even with hobby drones, the Ukraine military is calling for anyone like a hobbyist to contribute their, I guess, drone or skills. For example, you can see here what they posted on Facebook. It says, do you have a drone? Give it to the experienced pilots. Can you control a drone? Join the joint patrol with the unit's 112 separate brigade of the territorial defense of Kyiv. Kyiv is our home. Defending it is a common task. So they're asking even for drone operators and hobbyists and so forth. It says here, please sure to specify the area of the city where it is more convenient, your experience in piloting, type of drone, the number of batteries, whether, I guess, you served in the army and when, and give like contact details. Imagine that now, everyone, hobbyist drones as well. Now, that's why I said it kind of relates to the other story. Imagine you just banned everyone from using it. Now you're asking for help and no one has the skill and so forth to operate it, so you really have to think. I did mention that before too, where it seems like for a lot of people, it's that attitude of, oh, I don't care. Basically get rid of it, ban it and so forth, doesn't bother me. But as soon as the person can save your life, then you're like, okay, let's use it. I mean, you gotta be consistent there. And that's just further example, in my opinion, why you should allow people to use things like, let's say, a drone, if they're not doing anything wrong, especially nowadays with what people use, something as a toy to fly for fun, just to capture basic video and pictures. It's a little too late if you go to a situation like this and now you're asking people for help. Kind of makes you think too, because I could imagine in situations like this, where let's just say everything turns out great afterwards and like, let's thank all these people that help and let's make sure from now on they always have the rights to do this. 10 years later, everyone just takes it for granted, like, no one's gonna take this away. But then some greedy, I don't know, business person or someone that says, hey, I can make money off this stuff. Let me start restricting this guy and that guy. Nobody does anything. It's kind of like going in a circle afterwards. Like, what are you waiting for? A war, for example, before you start saying, okay, give people the rights to do this if they're not doing anything wrong, because it could benefit, I guess, the whole country and all of that. Alright, see you guys later.